Ladies and gentlemen, the Cleveland Browns have made a trade. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, or if you are new here, then please do me a favour and hit that subscribe button. So I was just going about my day, not really enjoying myself whilst at work, and then I get a notification. The Cleveland Browns have made a trade, not just shall we say, under the radar trade. They have traded for offensive tackle Tytus Howard from the Texans. So not something I was expecting to come in my notifications today. Don't get me wrong. I think a lot of us expected some moves to be made, maybe not this early. But just want to give my quick thoughts on it. And I say quick thoughts because, as I said, this was sprung on me out of the blue, and I have a million other things I need to get done. But this is more important, guys. The Cleveland Browns have made a start in overhauling what was the worst offensive line in the NFL. What was one of the worst offensive lines I've ever seen, if I'm being completely honest. The Browns have been played with, don't get me wrong, obviously injuries have played a part of that, but they've been played by some pretty bad offensive line play, and in particular at the tackle position. We've been trying to figure out that position since Joe Thomas left, and we are still yet to do so. Is this figuring out that position? Well, no. Tytus Howard is 29 years old. Obviously, this isn't a guy that's going to be here for the next decade. But you made strides towards overhauling, as I said, what was just the worst offensive line in the NFL. And, we heard Andrew Berry speak at the Combine. And my throat just went weird then, sorry. We heard Andrew Berry speak at the Combine. And, he made a comment that basically pointing to the Chicago Bears last year and saying that, they've basically given a model of how you can overhaul an offensive line pretty quickly within one off season. And obviously, that's through internal development, bringing in external additions, as well as obviously the draft. Now, I spoke about it a little bit in my Combine video, but just to kind of give you my idea, that's exactly kind of how I've viewed how the Browns will attack this offensive line. You're not going to go into the draft needing to find 5 starters on your offensive line. That is just malpractice. I've said it before, many others have said it. The draft, what is actually for is for the future, essentially. You shouldn't be drafting players that, if you're going into the draft and you're going, right, I need to find this week 1 starter, you're probably in a bad spot. So it was never a good idea to go into the draft needing all five offensive line positions filled. Don't get me wrong, that was never really the case anyway. I know how, a lot of the media have liked to run with the whole, the Browns are completely overhauling, replacing every single player from the offensive line last season. Is that going to be the case? I'm not convinced. I think Luke Whippler will be given a chance at centre. I believe Tevin Jenkins will be brought back. He will be given a chance at guard. So that alone is 2, technically you can say not starters, because obviously these guys weren't starters last year until Tevin Jenkins came in for Wyatt Teller and essentially took his job because he outperformed him. So I can, yes, you can get technical about it and say, well, it is 5 new starters, but it's not a case of 5 completely new guys that have never been here before coming in. We still don't even know about Joel Bitonio. We might get news. I mean, the way it's going, I'll probably finish this video and we'll get news that Joel Bitonio is actually coming back for 1 more year. So, if that's the case, you've got Joel Bitonio there, you've got Luke Whippler there, you've got Tevin Jenkins there. That's potentially 3 guys that were on the roster last year that could be your starters, obviously, on that interior. But one thing we know for certain, and that is that the Browns needed to get 2 tackles. Could you get 2 tackles in the draft? Certainly a possibility. I wouldn't have been that against it. But as I said, you don't want to go into the draft needing that and as that as a necessity. Trading for Tytus Howard even if you take a Freeling and you plan to be him to be your left tackle, and then you try to draft someone to be your right tackle, Howard doesn't stop you from doing that. Yes, you've given him a new 3-year contract on top of his deal. Works out around 20 million a year, so you could say, well, 20 million a year, he's obviously going to start. But as I said, he's 29. I'm sure the way that they've kind of structured that money, I'm sure there'll be an out, next year or the year after. So this doesn't stop you from drafting a right tackle, but it makes you feel a lot better going into the draft, knowing that you have that position filled essentially. And some people can say, is it filled, because the Texans' offensive line wasn't exactly very good last year. But, first and foremost, you're not giving a guy 20 million to come and not be the starting right tackle. That is for sure. Tytus Howard, barring injury, cross your fingers, touch wood, he will be your week 1 starting right tackle. And for 20 million a year, if you can get average average league average play out of your right tackle, I'm absolutely all on board, because as I said, we could have gone and signed a traffic cone and it would have been an improvement on what we had here last year. But just to touch on Tytus Howard, because I do think he's better than people are giving him credit for. Don't get me wrong, we're not bringing in Penny Sewell. I'm obviously not trying to say that. We're not bringing in Trent Richardson. This isn't the best right tackle in the NFL by any means. Of course it's not. You've just got him for a 5th round pick. But I do think he's better than people give him credit, and I do think he certainly raises the floor of this offensive line, and I think it's a good start. As I said, it was a 5th round pick. It cost you nothing. The Browns had 3 5th round picks this year. Obviously had our own pick. We had the 5th round pick from Las Vegas from the Kenny Pickett trade last offseason, and we had a 5th round pick from the Bengals that we got from Joe Flacco. So I haven't seen it yet, but I'm hoping that it's the Bengals pick. Just because if he is good, then we can kind of point to that and laugh at that and say, wow, I'm sure those 6 games where you went 1-5 with Joe Flacco were really worth giving the Browns their starting right tackle. But that's what I'm hoping for. But as I said, 5th round pick, it's not going to cost you anything. The money is obviously a bit more, 20 million a year. Some people might flinch at that, but to be honest, anyone that's followed this channel for long enough knows my view on money and stuff in the NFL. It's not really real, and it's the Cleveland Browns. They operate a model that allows them to spend a lot more cash than a lot of other teams. I don't have an issue giving Tytus Howard 20 million. As I said, I'm sure that the money's it's not 20 million guaranteed per year for the next 3 years. I'm sure that they've done some trickery with that money and how they've spread it out, and that's something that's not an issue for me. But just to give a little bit of an idea on who Tytus Howard is, this is a guy that's played his entire career for the Houston Texans, and played on some good offensive lines in Houston and also played on some bad offensive lines. Struggled a little bit as a rookie, but other than that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 straight years other than 2023 of pretty much playing every single game. So this is a guy that doesn't really have much of an injury history other than that 1 year in 2023 where he played 7 games. Other than that, he's pretty much shoot in to give you 14, 15 minimum starts a season. He started every single game he's played, 93 starts in the NFL. That alone, it's go and find a guy that has started 93 times in the NFL. You're going to be hard to come by. This is a guy that's got a lot of experience. As I said, he's played on some bad offensive lines, in particularly last year, which is probably why people, I think, have this kind of preconceived notion that maybe he's not very good, because obviously the Texans' offensive line last year, barring the Browns, was one of the worst in the NFL. But Tytus Howard was arguably, I say arguably, I think quite confidently I could make the argument that he was the best offensive lineman on that Texans offensive line last year. This is a guy who is a right tackle by trade, but he does have guard versatility. He has played both left guard and right guard in the NFL. 2021, I think he started the whole season at left guard. So this is a guy that has versatility across the line, but for 20 million a year, he's going to be playing right tackle, but it is obviously good to have that versatility, in kind of your toolkit and in your belt, that if something happens, maybe you do draft a tackle, or right, you draft 2 tackles, one of your guards gets hurt, maybe you can kick Howard into the inside and maybe move that rookie onto the outside. It just gives you more versatility with him being versatile across both tackle and guard. Left tackle is something he has not played, so the Browns are of course still in the market for a left tackle. Freeling is probably going to be the guy, but I'll save that for all of the draft videos once we get to that. But as I said, good start, and this is a guy that, don't get me wrong, run blocking, not great. Not great at all. This guy has never really graded out well as a run blocker. I think a couple of years he graded out in kind of the mid-60s by PFF, but this is a pass blocker by trade. This is a guy who even last year had a 77 pass block grade, which ranked 16th, I believe, in the NFL. He has consistently, pretty much his whole career in the NFL, been a top 15 pass blocker at both positions. I mean, at guard, when he was playing guard last year, he actually graded out as, I believe, the second or third best pass blocker from any offensive lineman in the NFL. So this is a guy that knows how to do in pass protection. That is his trade. Are we going to be running the ball with Monken, etc., etc.? There's obviously some concerns with his run blocking, but is it worse than what we've had here the last couple of seasons? No. I mean, the grades would suggest that it's not. I mean, the guys that were here the last few years graded out even worse than that in their run blocking. So, if you are bringing in someone that is, granted, not the best run blocker, but is at least improvement on what you had, but also a guy that is a top 15 pass blocker in the NFL, consistently been that throughout his career. There is not really anything for me to complain about, to moan about, to be annoyed about, to criticize with this. Yes, maybe the money's not amazing, but would you rather have given Rasheed Walker, and I say give him 20 million a year, which is obviously what Howard's on, but free agency, that could have started at 20 million. Couple teams start bidding for him. Next thing you know, it's 28 million. So I feel a lot better about giving Tytus Howard 20 million a year than I would giving Rasheed Walker 25 plus million a year. And it saves you having to, get involved in that kind of bidding war. You can now, you've got the right tackle position sorted. You can then go into free agency, maybe pick up some other spots, but mainly focus on the draft. And that's kind of where I want to wrap it up with how I think that the Browns are going to do this. I mentioned earlier about the Bears model. Do the Browns go and sign a guard in free agency? Do they go and sign a center in free agency? I certainly would not be shocked. I would not be surprised by that. I think there's definitely at least one more addition that they will probably make in free agency, or maybe another trade. And then we can go into the draft, as I said, with more versatility, knowing that it's not a matter of, right, we need to take the tackle with this pick, otherwise we're fucked. You've got a lot more versatility there. Who knows? Maybe they make a couple of more moves and they're out of tackle altogether in the draft. I mean, I wouldn't be. I am full bent on taking one of these tackles. At the end of the day, go look at the All-Pro tackles in the NFL. 95% of them were drafted in the first round, and 90% of them were drafted with the first 12 picks. So, that just kind of shows you, if you want all-pro tackle play, how you have to get it. And, the Browns are in that position this year. There's some good tackles, in my opinion, in this class. I think the Browns have to do it. But that's a conversation for another day. As I said, Tytus Howard is now a Cleveland Brown. He will be your starting right tackle for the 2026 season. He offers you versatility across the line. He can play left guard, he can play right guard. So, God forbid, this offensive line gets hit like it has the last few years with injuries. You'd feel comfortable about sliding Tytus Howard across if you needed to. So, I'm all for this move. As I said, I'm not sitting here saying this is the best signing ever. Oh my God, our right tackle position is sorted now forever. Of course not. But from what the situation the Browns were in, the kind of resources that they had, the opportunities that they had to address this offensive line, I think this is a smart move. I think this is a prudent move. Getting it done early. Does this mean that the Browns are going to be in the free agent quarterback market? Now they've got to tackle pretty early to help that guy in camp. Maybe, who knows? As I said with the other things, that's a story for another day. This just completely got thrown on us out of the blue. I'm sure there's going to be far more stuff like this thrown on us as we come into the coming weeks, the coming months, as we roll through what is just, it's the off season, but it feels just as busy as the season for most, and especially for anyone talking about the NFL. So that is my opinions on the Tytus Howard trade, guys. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Am I talking out of my arse? Do you think that this guy sucks and that this was a terrible move? Do you agree with me? Do you think this was a good move? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. As I kind of mentioned earlier, obviously the next few videos coming out will be about some of these prospects. Obviously, we've just seen the combine. These tackles did fantastic in the combine in terms of testing, etc., versus the wide receivers didn't really do that well. So all of that stuff to talk about in the coming days, in the coming weeks, in the coming months, and this is the first place you can find it if you want to hear a British guy talking about it. So as always, guys, thank you so much for watching. If you do enjoy my content, then please drop this video a like, hit that subscribe button. It's free, but it really helps out my channel. You can also check the links in the description to see where you can follow and interact with me on social media. As I always say, I'm trying to build a community of Cleveland Browns fans, and even if that means I only get to talk to one fan a day, I'm happy, because I'm talking Browns football with the best fan base in the world, and I mean that. Thanks again for watching, guys. Have an amazing week, but most importantly, go Browns.